when people were starting to rekindle that interest in the production of absinthe, like I can guarantee you, ever since that time, there's certain people that have been interested in seeing absinthe back, on their table. But the idea of having it made the old way, I mean, it really started to spark and take off in the late 1990s because of one thing, and that was a website.
Say that I think there was a group here in the U.S. That was kind of pushing for absinthe and kind of trying to help bring it back for a number of years before 2007. And I think there was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into that push, right? And I would go so far as to say that without this group, that we wouldn't have absinthe back here in the U.S., right? Wouldn't have had it as soon as we did. And I think you get a lot of emotional investment when you're in that kind of a push. And I think there was a lot of soul searching about what absinthe really was and about what it should be. And so I think a lot of the rules about absinthe have kind of come from that purist mentality of trying to recreate or bring back something that was real and pure. And
Pure and simple. I had heard fleeting references to absinthe growing up, right? And everybody kind of does these things that are kind of little bits of misinformation wrapped in, this mystery, and there's like an enigma about it, and you don't really know a lot about what it really does. There's always these mentions of hallucination and things like that, and those are the earliest things I remember.
So what would you say were some of the main misconceptions that you were getting from people who were coming into the absinthe house?
We have so many. There's so much about absinthe that is wrong, and I honestly don't hate it. I love the mystique surrounding it. I love that everyone comes in and is like, this isn't legal, what you're doing isn't right, like you're serving a legal drink. I love it. I love all of it. But the biggest one was, everyone was like, this isn't real absinthe because it's not legal anymore. And I think like that's the number one thing we deal with is just like a lot of people didn't even know that it became legal again in the United States to serve absinthe. And that was only in the 80s, but man, like I don't think very many people knew about it, and there's still this like want and this mystery and this like desire for it to be illegal. So then the other major misconception was like, am I gonna trip? I don't want to drink too much of this because I don't want to trip. So it not being a hallucinogenic drug was a big misconception. I think that's like the number one question we get.
And full disclaimer, we're all drinking absinthe right now.
Heck yes.
Is that the compound out of wormwood is called thujone, right? Mm-hmm. So it's the thing that everyone always gets afraid of, right? In high quantities, it's a convulsant. It's not going to make you see any green fairies or trip or anything like that. It's in high doses a convulsant. It is in that grand wormwood, but there's more thujone in sage, in tansy, and some other things that are not really as regulated. So people, when they think about absinthe, they think of France, right? France is a traditional home of absinthe, and it kind of is, and it was back in the heyday, but it really started a little bit earlier than that. So it started in Cuvée, Switzerland, and there are so many myths and legends wrapped up around its humble beginnings that I don't know that we'll ever actually know exactly what happened unless we could build a time machine and go back and actually be there when it happened. But some of the more common understanding is going to be that there were women who gathered herbs in this little village of Cuvée. And what they did is they would take these herbs and put them together in alcohol, soak them, right? And they would make medicines for people.
One thing that I know which surprised me and changed my views to when it came to my family was I had this idea again of how we were wronged and this whole recipe was stolen, and it was this awful thing. And then the more I got into it, the more I looked at it, I thought, holy crap, my family, they were not innocent.
now, because that conversation's happening with consumers and people like you out talking about it, you know, and sort of getting super excited about it and putting it out there and giving people the history plus what's happening now, I feel like it's headed towards, this is what absinthe can be. This is where it's not been yet, but it can go there.
I love it. I think people are, even in the last like 5 years, maybe like just getting so much more experimental with it. And I think that's like what America needed to do, essentially, to like do absinthe right, because like the French and the Swiss absinthe people are never going to give that up. They're never going to budge like a centimeter on it. And so what makes more sense for us is to get weird and experimental and I think it's exactly kind of what happened with gin, where it's like, oh my God, we can do this with local botanicals. We can do this in a way that represents our city and our area and like what, like the flavors we like. And then it becomes like a regionally specific thing, which is kind of how it started in Switzerland anyway, which just like full circles it, makes me really happy.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely the truth. We've come across that where it's not really like we're redefining absinthe in America. We're going back to its roots. And, you know, there's a very narrow version out there of what people think absinthe is.
That's one of the things that I love so much about absinthe, is that there are some rules you have to play by to call it an absinthe, but man, you can get so creative with it. Some coloring steps can be using like a Pontica wormwood or a Roman wormwood. The small wormwood is what they'd call it. You can use lemon balm or melissa. You can use hyssop. Those are pretty common coloring stages that kind of get this peridot green to the absinthe. But you don't have to stop with that. There are people who, both in the pre-distillation of the absinthe and in the coloration stage, just go nuts, man. They just add all kinds of good stuff into it.
You should at least take a screenshot, and you can, in parentheses, tag Brian Cushing, but you should actually also tag Jack White.
Be interesting to people. What are we looking at?
I taste a lot of absinthe that's made now, and I've noticed it has artificial color. It's very sweet. I'm not even sure sometimes if they've added particular sweetness.
You just have to run
Duplay, Fritz, de Brevans, Sebastian, a lot of the books that were from that same period, the last 20 years of the 1800s. You got to remember that distilling at that time had undergone a serious change. I mean, there wasn't really a commercial avenue for mass producing really high quality liqueurs or spirits like absinthe until they had the ability to have access to cheap neutral spirit. And they weren't making their spirit, you know, in-house. They were purchasing, just like we do with MGP and stuff, or, you know, one of these other companies. And the climate is there where they've been clandestinely distilling for years, and then someone decided the administrative people that exist decided to make it legal because, oh, wow, okay, the rest of the world's starting to make absinthe legal. Let's not miss this boat. Cash cow, opportunities for earning, you know, at a regulatory level. And they took off. But here's the difference, though. Those people had a pocket of the world where they weren't like suddenly starting to experiment with distilling. They didn't, it wasn't like this. I hate to use this term, but it's not like carpetbaggers catching the wave.
Yes, exactly. Okay. The actual artisans are doing the thing there.
It's people that have already invested a little bit of time and energy and have anecdotally, you know, a connection with people that were doing it, you know, generations before. And this is something that's kind of a little in their blood. Craft distilling isn't going to change, especially in the manufacture of liqueurs, spirits, cordials, whatever, until it's a little bit in our blood.
What's the proof on it?
I don't know. It doesn't say. I guess we'll know if Kate actually liked us or not here momentarily, Ron, because I feel like if somebody was going to poison us, she's for sure able to do as such. Maybe only one of us should have drank it at first.
I dropped the boat off, woke up at like 10 o'clock the next morning, and I was like, oh, shit, I got an alligator in my boat.
It's funny because Alan and I, we did a little clip together where we're talking about the Smurfs and alchemy. Like all the little references in there. So when we make Gargamel references and such on the back of the absinthe,
That's
what
pretty
that's all
fun.
about.
Hey, Christy, do you notice something wrong with my bottle from Saturday?
It's empty.
You don't have, oh, yours is empty.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome, buddy.
And the exciting thing is the unexpected. It's like we were talking about earlier with this absinthe thing in general. It's like everything you learn is 10 more questions, and that's how it always is with history.